If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. Waiting on John. He's running a little bit behind tonight, and we have not heard from Clede since earlier today. Hope he's okay. But right now he's MIA, and of course I'm under the weather today for the first time in a long time, so this might be a little bit of a struggle to get through this one, but we will get there. I want to make just a quick reminder for people that if you sign up as a Survival Dispatch News Guardian and you want to be part of our Signal chat, you have to install Signal on your phone. You cannot hide your number. If you hide your number, I can't find you to send you an invite. And there's a lot of back and forth emails over that one particular topic. If you want to hide your email, or pardon me, your phone number, after you accept the invite, that's fine. But before you get the invite, you cannot hide your number. And I'd really, really appreciate it if people could catch that. But anyway, moving right along. So we're going to start with the Command 11 sit rep, even though Clede's not here. As soon as I hear something, I'll let y'all know. But I want to play a video before we get going. And it's Corey Harrison of Pawn Stars, and he rips the leftist media, CNN, MSNBC, for their rhetoric that took Charlie Kirk's life. This position that people in the mainstream media are saying, oh, well, the rhetoric comes from both sides, is just not true. The facts just don't bear that out. Now, fair warning here, this guy's comments are somewhat not safe for work language or home or youngins. And actually, see, I'm a little bit discombobulated here because I'm not feeling very good. I woke up this morning, high fever, some sort of flu, but I forgot we got to do the conflicted question. So let me get that out of the way first. Conflictedthegame.com. If you're not familiar with this, there's 14 card decks that ask questions in post-apocalyptic scenarios that typically have some element of morality tied to them, hence the name Conflicted. So put the following resources in order of importance to you: food, water, shelter, weapons. If you could only pick 3 to bug out with, what would they be and why? So good question. And if I survive to the end of this episode, I will give you my answers, and love to see your answers in the live chat, whatever platform that you're watching this on. All right. So moving along to Corey Harrison of Pawn Stars. And again, there's some, call it colorful language in here. So fair warning. It is 1 minute and 18 seconds long.
I'm going to throw it out there. I never thought I'd agree with Democrats, man. Thoughts and prayers aren't enough this time. There needs to be action. I'm done with this. This is ridiculous. You guys ever notice it's one side? It's one side every single time. Do you know what happens when you sit there, CNN, MSNBC, when you sit there and you demonize somebody, you call them a Nazi? Nazis are supposed to be evil. You're literally telling the entire country, that every one of your viewers, everybody that watches you online, that this man, it's okay to kill Nazis, right? You don't like the way he thinks. Who's the Nazi? You guys literally let this man die on your watch. You guys are the one that contributed to this. It was every single one of you that supported anything that they said. Every Democrat, every news channel, anybody that ever said, if you don't think the way we think, this man is a Nazi. This man had 3 children. He was a pastor. He was a father, and he was loved by a bunch of people. You guys killed this man, whether you pulled the trigger yourself. There needs to be action. There needs to be something done. And there needs to be perp walks for this. You guys created a monster. You guys have to deal with it. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
Yeah, and I get his sentiments perfectly well there. So moving on to the next one here. This is a post from Khalid. And actually, seeing as John and Khalid aren't with me, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for y'all. There we go. All right. So we love Sarah Adams. She's a warlord against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Below, she lays out the 9/11 2.0 aviation threat as we keep hammering home the ISIS ground assault that will hit 10 to 15 medium-sized cities with tier 1 hospitals. You can download the complete threat assessment public version from our website. So if you go to survivaldispatch.news, right now you'll see this video streaming up top, but go to the sit rep directly below that. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the sit rep where my name is, you'll see it's available for download for free there as well. But I'm going to grab that link and throw it out into the chat as well. So you can grab it off of Sarah's site. You can grab it off of survivaldispatch.news, or you can grab it off the link I'm sending to everybody right now for Command 11. It's not a long read, but it's really good information. And it's all about Hamza bin Laden, by the way. So Hamza, Osama bin Laden's oldest son, kind of like the heir to his terrorist throne. We had declared that he was dead years ago. I want to say it was like 2019, 2020. MI6 a couple years ago said, no, he's not dead. And we had to kind of play catch up on our side before we announced that as well. But he's been seen in public in Afghanistan. They're all operating with impunity now because, it's terror central. So moving on to the next one here. And this is a video with Tig Teagan. Super nice guy. Met him at Randy Couture's gym in Vegas last year. Really, really humble guy. And here he is talking about Sarah on the Sean Ryan show. She likes to get people whacked. Best line to describe Sarah. That's pretty funny. 59-second video.
She likes getting people whacked.
Yeah,
She's
she
really good
does.
at it.
She still likes getting people whacked.
What are you studying? They capture as a right, so they send what?
Under a drone strike, Iran, Qaeda, Karachi, Peshawar, Al Qaeda. Those targets, obviously, the attempt was drone strikes.
I see people trying to go after her, especially on X and stuff. Oh, you're fake. You're fake. Dude, she's far from that, man. I worked with her in a lot of different places. We got some people whacked.
So you've worked with her several times.
Mm-hmm.
Where else did you work with her at?
Mainly in Pesh. I think that was my funnest place.
Why do you say that?
We got some HVTs whacked in that place.
Nice.
So for those of you not familiar with the acronym HVT, it stands for high value target. But moving on to the next one here. This is pretty disappointing, to be quite honest. I really anticipated that Donald Trump would do a better job this time around as far as vetting people in his administration. And obviously he doesn't vet everybody himself, but whoever he's tasked with vetting people has made some pretty major missteps. I mean, y'all know what my feelings are on Pam Bondi, but this Tom Barrack Jr., who's our ambassador to Syria and the Middle East, unbelievable, kissing Giuliani's ass. So the head of the government in Syria now, Giuliani is, or Giuliani, I guess, is former Al-Qaeda. Then he was one of the ones who split off from Al-Qaeda to start the first branch of ISIS. They basically trimmed his beard, took the dress off, put a suit on him, and now he's, supposedly legitimate. It's bad. I mean, he killed a couple thousand Christians, or his forces did, just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, something like that. But Tom Barrack is just doing a horrible job here. So this is not a real estate deal where you would run such useless propaganda. Giuliani is a terrorist, full stop. You are a terrorist sympathizer, full stop. If your orders are coming from Secretary Rubio or Donald Trump, we can only pray for what is going to happen to Americans in the very near future. That blood will be on your hands, and the people will never forgive the administration's inaction. So here he is, Ambassador Tom Barrack. What an honor to meet with Admiral Cooper and President al-Shara in Damascus today. Grateful for the opportunity to discuss continued collaboration with President al-Shara to counter ISIS and work towards a stable, peaceful Syria. So that's the beginning of Jelani's name. But he's been kissing these guys' asses now since he took on the role. And he reports back in, I think he's a dotted line to Sebastian Gorka, basically. And now you see Sebastian Gorka saying, oh, no, the Taliban are our friends. They have the same objectives as us. We're paying them $87 million a week, not 40, not 80, 87 million. There's one big bucket that's like $40 million a week so that the Taliban military can essentially keep Al-Qaeda and ISIS in check. There's $5 million a week that goes to the top 5 guys in the Taliban. There's another 25, and then there's all these other smaller buckets. But the Taliban are essentially smiling in our face while stabbing us in the back. They're going so far as to dress up their own manpower in ISIS and Al-Qaeda uniforms, patches, send them into Pakistan to commit terrorist acts. Then when they come back, they kill their own people. And then they turn around and they say to us, like Sebastian Gorka, see, we're a good partner. We're keeping Al-Qaeda and ISIS in check. And the whole thing is just, it's unbelievable, to be quite frank. Just very, very disappointing. And it's like it was mentioned there, there's potential blood on people's hands, a lot of blood. All right, so moving along to the next one here. A drone was flying directly above when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, capturing everything. Guess who owns it? Hint, not a consumer drone. So, of course, nobody's revealed, as far as I can tell, who actually owns this drone. But 16 seconds. Have a look at this.
Apparently, there's been a shooting.
So I would hazard to guess that that drone is, owned by a 3 or 4 letter agency, most likely, but we don't have any definitive proof of that. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories now, of course, coming out on the Charlie Kirk assassination. I got a nasty gram from somebody on X yesterday saying that because I didn't believe that Charlie Kirk's friend and his security guy who were standing beside the stage, because I didn't believe that they were sending hand signals, that I was now one of them. So I have to assume by one of them, he's saying that, I'm part of like the crowd, like the legacy media, whatever you want to call them, but never a dull moment at all. That's for sure. All right, moving on to the next one from Nick Sorter. Democrats are refusing to admit their violent rhetoric led to Charlie Kirk's killing. So here's a 2-minute compilation of Democrats calling Republicans fascists and encouraging violence. Watch every second of this. Democrat violence must end. And again, we're seeing people in the mainstream media, politicians, the rhetoric is from both sides. It's not. This is a completely one-sided debacle and call for action and essentially call for assassinations, assaults, whatever you want to call it. I'll tell you what, I'm at the point now myself that when we're in public, if I see someone who's mentally ill, thinks they're the other sex, somebody who's got pink, blue, purple hair and their face looks like they fell into a box of fishing tackle, that number one, I have to assume that they're mentally ill. Number 2, I have to assume that they're armed and dangerous. And number 3, I'm going to be watching their hands and their waistline as long as they're within proximity of us. It's really come down to that. These are very mentally unstable people, which, by the way, I asked, we're not monetized on Grok, and I don't really care if we monetize there or not, or on X, I should say. So I asked Grok what our impressions were. You got to have 5 million impressions every 90 days to qualify to be monetized. Didn't give me an answer, but what it did do is it said that I was notorious for stirring the pot over SSRIs. So I'll take that as a badge of honor. All right, let's hear what the governor of Utah has to say here. He said some strange things on the news over the past couple days, by the way. So enjoy or not. 2 minutes, 24 seconds. I'm going to play the whole thing. If anybody asks you, or says to you, well, this is on both sides of the aisle, it's not on both sides of the aisle. I have asked people repeatedly for years now, show me the videos of prominent conservatives, Charlie Kirk would be a great example, saying go out and do harm to other people. And to date, big fat goose egg. All right, here we go.
3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist!" exclamation point, catch exclamation point.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
No one has ever been more dangerous to this country than Donald Trump, and he is a fascist to his core.
And shut down the city! We are at war!
We're at a war right now.
We are at war.
So you have to be willing to do whatever is necessary in order to save the country.
And that's why the gloves are off.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
And yes, there are many threats to democracy. We see it with these extreme candidates.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
What the American public want is for us to bring actual weapons to this bar fight. This is an actual fight.
You know, this is literally call to arms.
The MAGA movement is a threat.
But Michelle says that, when they go low, we go high.
No. With all due respect, if they go low, we don't go high.
When they go low, we kick them.
We take them to the mud and choke them out.
And make sure that they stay down. And you know what? Kick them when they're down because they deserve it.
Get up in the face of some Congress people.
We are going to be in your face. We are going to be on your...
We have to fight this in the streets.
We're going to fight it in the streets. It's time to step out of your comfort zone and step out into the streets.
To our Republican colleagues, if you do not see the light, we will bring the fire. Resist! You and your little friend off of Twitter. Y'all about to find out.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
He's not going to have a third term. He may not finish his term.
Yes, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. There will be news sometime. Just so you know, there will be news.
What kind of a threat is that right there? I got to back that up. What a scumbag. Listen to this one more time.
Not finish his term.
Yes, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. There will be news sometime. Just so you know, there will be news.
Wow. I mean, I don't know what you can say when it comes to that guy. That's off the chain. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump into the main topic tonight. So essentially tonight is the 12th episode out of the second series that we're doing. So this long war series is actually 12 series long that have 12 episodes each. It's 144 episodes that kind of step us through. And just a quick refresher. And all these, by the way, all these episodes were designed to stand on their own. So you can watch them in any order. You can watch all of them, some of them, whatever works for you. You'll get value out of all of them. So we're now at the stage of this series where we've had 9/11 2.0 hit. So 10 to 15 tier 2 cities hit with tier 1 trauma centers, significant death count, significant damage done to our country economically, psychologically, and every other way that you can possibly imagine. You have to keep in mind that Biden Mayorkas, which was really Obama, threw our southern door wide open for 4 years. You've heard it directly from my good friend J.J. Carroll that 200,000 SIAs were admitted into the country, special interest aliens. So that acronym essentially stands for a known terrorist or a known terrorist associate, sympathizer. They're tied to those terrorists in one way or another. And in reality, if they're telling us it's 200,000, or at least Biden's DHS was saying 200,000, it's significantly higher than that. So there was a guy busted in Utah today. They specifically said WMDs, weapons mass destruction. So they caught him with all kinds of explosives, amongst other devices, and he put an explosive, from what I understand. Again, I'm under the weather pretty severely, so I didn't have a chance to do much studying today, but he put an explosive under a car, is my understanding, and it malfunctioned and didn't blow up. But what I'm getting at is that in this long war, after 9/11 2.0 hits, we will be transitioning into a similar scenario to the Middle East where terrorist attacks just become a regular thing, daily or close to daily in different types of scopes. It's not going away anytime soon, put it that way. So essentially the 9/11 2.0 and all of the stuff that comes out of that falls under the banner, the tent of what's being referred to as the Islamic Army. And this is all of the bad guys joining up together, right? So Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Taliban, TTP, ISKP, Boko Haram, the list goes on. And they've unified to stand against the great Satan, which of course would be us, would be America. So once this 9/11 2.0 hits, there's no going back. We've got to discuss things like, how do you raise your kids in a high threat environment? How do you run your businesses? How do you build faith communities? There's just a lot of aspects to this that we're really not prepared for on a large scale. I'd really, really encourage you to get your communication stuff figured out as far as your preps are concerned. I get constant emails from people saying, well, what's the timeline for this? So Khalid's intel, Sarah Adams' intel says, and Jane Doe's intel says that the window is between November and Ramadan, which is February 18th, 2026. Speaking of those individuals, I don't know if everybody caught this or not, but we've started another intel group called Dead Drop Intel. So a dead drop would be similar to what Jerry did, which was Mel Gibson in the 1997 movie Conspiracy Theories, where, he was kind of kooky and he had tinfoil wrapped around his walls, but he would send out this paper newsletter that people could read and then destroy. That's what a dead drop is. So Mike Glover had an intel blog at one point in time called G14, and we've resurrected it. Now, just to be clear on this, I am not an intelligent subject matter expert, and I don't claim to be. So I'm in the background on Dead Drop Intel, but you can go to deaddropintel.org, which is the Substack. We're going to hard launch it tomorrow. We wanted to wait till we got some content up. I think we've got about a dozen pieces of content up now, so now we're ready to roll. But that encompasses Mike Glover, Khalid Muhammad, Sarah Adams, Jane Doe, Matt Butler, Keith Graves, Ryan Geho, and 2 or 3 other individuals that I don't know, but that Khalid has brought to the table. So when I say background, I look after all the technical stuff, both on the Survival Dispatch, plus Survival Dispatch News, plus Dead Drop Intel now, and plus our media group, which is called Outlaw Media Group. And I'm not going to get deep into that tonight, but it's a group where we can get eyeballs for maligned industries like gun companies, knife companies, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, to get back on track with tonight's episode. So the reality is that none of this stuff 9/11 2.0 related and beyond is theoretical anymore. The intelligence is very credible, whether it be Sarah or Khalid, and amongst others. Jane Doe, for example, was really early on this stuff. Fascinating interview with her maybe 6 months ago on Sean Ryan's podcast. And they're all predicated on complex coordinated attacks like Mumbai 2008. So essentially, one of the big messages we've been trying to get out to people here, it's not over when you think it's over. So in other words, these guys, they only have to send in maybe 10 people to each of these cities as far as boots on the ground, and a couple go over here and do an attack, and a couple go over there and do an attack. But they wait for 20-30 minutes for first responders to show up, and then they launch the secondary attacks, which are targeted at the first responders. And there will be more damage done in the secondary and tertiary attacks than the initial attacks. The initial attacks are just meant to draw out law enforcement, first responders. Mumbai, for example, two of the bad guys hit a train station and killed over 50 people inside of 2 minutes with full auto AK-47s, for example. And then they waited for the authorities to show up and then did their thing a second time and a third time before they all got together at the Taj Hotel towards the end. So if you take nothing else away from all 144 episodes, God forbid that you're caught on the X during 9/11 2.0, that you're in one of these tier 2 cities that only have one tier 1 trauma center. And tier 2, by the way, means 100 to 500,000 population. So believe it or not, cities like Miami fall into a tier 2 city. Is that if it goes down and you're on the X or close to the X, get as far away as you possibly can. You don't want to be anywhere in the vicinity when first responders show up, number one. Number two, there have been a rash of break-ins at National Guard armories, dry cleaners, etc. over the past 18 months, stealing National Guard uniforms, boots, law enforcement uniforms, paramedic uniforms. So that's a common tactic and ploy that's used by terrorists in attacks, that they pose as the authorities. Don't trust anybody. Look for the tells. A lot of times the footwear doesn't match the rest of the uniform. Badges are not easy to forge and replicate. Look at their waist. So their duty belt, if it's a cop. If they don't have handcuffs, for example, they don't have pepper spray, something less lethal, taser. If they don't have a level 3 retention holster, which is really quite obvious to the eye, that's not a cop, and you can't trust them, and you need to get out of there. And I've used this example multiple times, but it's a good one. The people who are paying attention at the concert 10/7 in Israel, when they saw the paragliders coming in with the guys with rifles, they ran to their cars and tried to exfil the location. And a couple Hamas guys dressed up as Israeli police said, "Whoa, it's not safe to go by here." And they slaughtered all of them in their cars. So that's their MO essentially. So what's happened with the door being left open is that call it the landscape of our homeland security has forever been changed. And it's, again, this is a very slippery slope that we're already well down, and I don't think there's any going back. You can call me a doomer or whatever you want. In reality, if Khalid and Sarah's intel is wrong, and we're wrong at Survival Dispatch News, we'll chalk that up as a win, because that means that people won't be slaughtered, although I don't see that unfolding. All right, segment number 1. Basically, this is a reality check, okay? So I've already explained what 9/11 2.0 means for daily life afterwards, right? You're under a constant threat. Your normal way of conducting business, your normal way of getting around town, going to the grocery, et cetera, all of that will change dramatically. And I would say that after Charlie Kirk's assassination, some stuff that's already shifted is that I would be very surprised to see any outdoor events put on by political figures going forward. If they do, I think they're taking their lives into their own hands. But I think that that's one of the things that's come out of the Charlie Kirk stuff. I think another thing is that a lot of us have not had trust in the FBI for a number of years. People like myself, primarily because they wanted to tell everybody in the country that middle-aged white males were the number one threat to the country, and the numbers just don't bear that out, and that's just not true. So there's an unconfirmed story out there, for example, that came out yesterday that says that FBI agents specifically withheld the information that the supposed Charlie Kirk supposed killer, that he had a boyfriend who's going through this transition stuff, whatever you want to call it, because they didn't want the stigmatism attached to it of trans violence. But we clearly know there's a whole lot of trans violence. So moving on from there, I mean, basically the psychological impacts last a lifetime after these types of attacks. So there will be a constant element of fear. There'll be a constant element of people having to be vigilant. It's going to cause anxiety across the board, whether it's children's parents, business owners, churches, anybody who stands up and speaks the truth. The threats that are being put out right now are absolutely disgusting. There's a number of people on X who've been saying that now that Charlie Kirk's been eliminated, that his wife and children should be eliminated. I mean, it's just true, unadulterated evil. So at the end of the day, though, I mean, we're Americans. We're not going to give up living life. And I don't think it serves anybody well to be in a state of paranoia, and giving up on society. But people's situational awareness is going to have to go to a whole new level, and deciding, what venues you want to frequent or not comes into play. Myself, I stopped going to NFL games probably 10 years ago. I think I've been to one in between there. And that's a prime high value target for Al Qaeda in particular. That's not something you would see ISIS attack. Al Qaeda are the ones who want like the big bang, the big, splash, whatever you want to call it. So at the end of the day, we'll move forward, and, we're not going to, I guess I'm looking for the right word here. We're not going to shrivel up or anything like that, but people's attention to detail needs to be that much better, which, by the way, interesting piece of news that hasn't been covered yet, as far as I've seen. If it has, maybe just a little bit, but I couldn't find it in the news. I actually had to go to the court system here in Florida. The provision in Florida law that prevented open carry was struck down 4 days ago as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Florida, which is a pretty big deal, because you've got California, Illinois, New York, and Florida as the 4 states without the ability to open carry. And yet we're supposedly the gunshine state here. And the reason I mention that is because I've seen, in other states, it's happening in Texas right now, where, people are taking long guns with them, for example. I'm not advocating that everybody open carry and carry long guns, but there's a time and a place for everything. So, for example, when we're on the interstate, we're traveling to our cabin in Georgia, I open carry at every gas station. So my head's on a swivel. I get the gas started. I walk 20 feet away from the truck, and I keep eyes on everything. And at least one time in the past couple of years, open carrying most definitely kept some bad elements away from us, but I won't bore you with that story. So at the end of the day, I think the biggest challenge after 9/11 2.0 is going to be maintaining some sense of normality, because the new normal is not going to be the same as the old normal. And, I guess the $64,000 question is, how do you balance vigilance without becoming constantly fearful or paralyzed? And that's a tough one, because look at what happened in Charlie 19. To this day, we still have some people. I saw an article last week that somebody had stepped foot out of their house for the first time in 5 years because of the Charlie 19 psyop, for lack of a better term. And obviously, some people will be paralyzed. And of course, we've covered recently, if you think Patriot Act 1.0 was bad, wait till you see what's coming with Patriot Act 2.0. As far as if you're a parent and you have young children, you have to talk to them about this stuff without scaring the crap out of them. But they're probably going to hear about this in their schools as well. Now, I'm in no position to tell any of you what to do with your kids, but myself, if I had youngins right now, they would not be in a public school for a whole bunch of reasons. I wouldn't want them indoctrinated by these kooky far left teachers. Which, speaking of which, I don't know what the total number is. I do know that there's a database that's been compiled just in the past 4 or 5 days that has over 40,000 people in it who've issued threats related to Charlie Kirk, saying, we're going to go after somebody else next, so on and so forth. And it's going to be interesting to see precisely what comes out of that as far as the fallout's concerned. But the fallout, to a large extent already, is many of those people who've been making, really evil comments on social media have lost their jobs. So maybe that's one of the things that comes out of one good thing that comes out of a horrible situation with Charlie Kirk. So moving on from there, segment 2 is raising kids in a new normal. So we'll get a little bit deeper into it here. Not too deep, but a little bit. So practical strategies for teaching children situational awareness. We've discussed this on some other podcasts, and essentially the best way to do it is to gamify it. So in other words, whatever the environment is, it could be a gas station convenience store, it could be a restaurant, turn it into a game and ask something like, how many people came through the front door in the past 5 minutes? How many people went out of the front door in the past 5 minutes? How many people came in wearing a hat? Like just little things like that that it's a game. It doesn't speak to fear, and get them in the habit of paying attention to what's going on around them and not having their face buried in their weapon of mass distraction, which I personally think that those things are, haven't been good for society. I'll just leave it at that. So digital safety is the next part. Of course, I come from high tech. So kids are exposed to a tremendous amount of stuff that we weren't exposed to, and it's had a very tangible effect. And a tangible effect, here's a great way of explaining the tangible effect. I can't tell you now how many videos that I've watched of youngins, Gen Zers, say that Charlie Kirk's assassination was 100% justified. How did that seed ever get planted to the point where we have young, adults going around saying it's okay to assassinate somebody who doesn't agree with your point of view? Obviously, that's never existed before now at any point in the past in our society. So digital safety, I think, is a pretty big thing. If you still have some element of control over your youngins, if they're young enough that you can still control how much time they have on the phone, what they can view on the internet, those sort of things, I would highly suggest that you do that so that they don't become so desensitized to violence or programmed to think that it's all right to kill somebody who doesn't agree with you. Because the videos that I've seen just make me shake my head like, my God, how did these youngins ever get to the point where they think, well, that person, I don't agree with them because they're anti-trans, so therefore it's okay to kill them? Unbelievable. So I think the next part to this with children is teaching them things like self-reliance. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of, call it absentee fathers in society today, where unlike the rest of us, we always had grandfathers and fathers who would teach us how to use tools, how to rebuild the engine in a car, for crying out loud, at 15 years old. Proper gun safety, all of these things. And I think that there's two categories there. So there's self-reliance and there's responsibility, and instilling those values in your kids. If you don't take the time to raise your kids, then the woke progressive education system will, and the internet will, and you might not be too happy with the outcome in the end. Now, I've got some links that I'm going to start putting into the live chat. Actually, it's better to show it down here like this. So whenever you see links show up from Survival Dispatch in the live chats, it's one of us sharing those with you. So I'm not going to read through these articles, preparing small communities for terrorist attacks, but everything that we have queued up in tonight's brief, the brief goes to all the panelists, which so far tonight's just me. Like to disseminate that and share it so that you can read this stuff on your own whenever you want. There's a plethora of information out there. It's really just spending a little bit of time pouring through it and finding the good versus the not good. There's a lot of good stuff out there, though, just to be quite frank. So with that being said, we'll keep moving along here. And the next section, segment 3, is business and work under a constant threat. So probably the biggest threat to businesses, unless they're 100% service-based, would be supply chain disruption. And we've seen how easy it is for the supply chain to break. And if you have a business or you work for a business that sells widgets of one form or another, being prepared for supply chain disruption would be a really, really good thing. So let me give you a tangible example. So there was a company in DFW that were one of the largest commercial glazing companies in all of Texas. So these are the people who make windows for high rises, those sort of things, skyscrapers, office buildings, etc. You don't order windows for those types of projects. So your glazing company will buy the glass, the butyl, everything, and it's all custom assembled for those types of businesses. So this glazing company had brought in a bunch of MBAs from somewhere in the Northeast, and the owner turned over control of them to run basically their processes, and they went with what's called JIT, just in time. So it means that we're not going to invest any money in materials until we absolutely have to, until we absolutely need it. And I was in a meeting that was really quite interesting where their numbers, the number of fines that they were getting for non-completion of contract or basically breaking the timeline. It's called the critical path in construction. Breaking the critical path because of all these problems they had could be traced back to the fact that the way they had done it in the past, that they ditched in favor of doing just in time. What was happening is they weren't getting stuff just in time. So if the windows weren't in, then you can't have the sheetrockers putting up sheetrock and mudding it and whatnot with no windows and being exposed to wind and rain and all of those sort of things. So there's penalties that are associated with that. So the owner of the company had a USB drive, and he asked somebody, he said, plug it in, put it up there on the screen. And he said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the way we used to do business. And this is directly relevant to the segment of tonight's podcast. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to rent this facility down the street, this warehouse it was huge. I want to say it was maybe a couple 100,000 square feet. And we're going to buy all of the materials for our jobs a minimum of 3 months in advance, preferably 6 months in advance. And one of the MBA spoke up and said, oh my God, do you know what that's going to cost you in interest on our, line of credit? And he said to the guy running the computer, he said, yeah, flip it over to the next screen. He said, here's what's happened over the past 12 months and with your way of doing it. And the penalties that have been applied for breaking the critical path was tens of millions of dollars. It was really, really egregious. And he said, flip to the next page and let me show you what it would have looked like doing it my way, even paying interest on our line of credit. And what they would have paid in interest on their line of credit was an order of magnitude less than what the penalties were. And then, of course, with the penalties and pushing these projects off the critical path, your reputation gets smoked. And that catches up with you very, very quickly in the construction industry. So my point is, for businesses, I think even right now, we don't have to wait for 9/11 2.0 because we've seen how fragile the supply chain is. If you have the ability to stack up materials and products for your business now and going forward, I'd highly recommend that you do that. Because at the end of the day, I know a bunch of companies in the gun industry who made a shit ton of money during Charlie 19, and I know a bunch of them who lost a shit ton of money during Charlie 19. The ones who made money during Charlie 19 had liquidity where they could get a call from somebody, like Chattanooga Shooting Supplies is a big wholesaler, for example. Sport South is another one. And they would say, hey, we've got this, this, and this. And I know guys who basically said, I'll take everything that you've got. I don't care what the price is. So they had products to sell. But the other people who didn't have the means to do that, they got smoked because it's really hard to make money selling products when you have no stock, when you have no products. So take that for whatever it's worth. But that's my advice to businesses, right? Start that stuff right now. There's also stuff, as far as continuity planning is concerned. So what happens, if there's, bomb attacks in cities and streets are shut down, how can your company function without those, the roads, the trucks, all of the stuff that you need? Do you have a remote operation? What do you have for secure communications? Like, a lot of people think that they have secure comms when they absolutely do not have secure comms. WhatsApp would be a good example, right? Yeah. Is it encrypted? Yeah. But Meta gave every government agency in the Western world access to the back end. There's no security in that whatsoever. The next part would be maintaining a safe environment for your patrons. So especially important to venues that have large numbers of people. I personally think, like, we have a Tanger outlet here south of us in Daytona. Of course, there's one north of us in St. Augustine. They're all up and down the I-95 corridor here. I personally think that those types of shopping centers are going to have visible security, armed visible security. And I'm not talking about retired guys. I'm not talking guys with big bellies and a 357 Magnum, because that's not going to help you when bad guys show up with rifles. So it's kind of the de-evolution of America, and unfortunately, that we'll have to have armed people like that. But myself, if I'm going somewhere and there isn't a high level of security like that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'm willing to patronize those businesses. And other than that, having a financial buffer for your business if you're self-employed, and being able to pivot quickly, having that plan B and C in place. We're back to the old adage: 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So make sure you have several levels of backups for your stuff. So just want to quickly mention that if y'all go to, let me just pull it up here. If y'all go to survivaldispatch.news, if we're not broadcasting, you don't see this video up top here, but you'll see the sit rep and everything below it. And if you haven't seen what a sit rep looks like, I'll show you one here. This is from today. Okay. So you can sign up for a free account. You get the sit rep every day that we broadcast an episode. It's essentially the written component that goes with the podcast, and everything down to my signature here is free. Our Saturday watch guide is free. Our instructional videos from JJ Morris are free. So you don't have to pay for any of that. But if you do sign up for $7.99 a month or $75 a year, which gets you 2.5 months for free, you get all of our sources, which is what all this is, for each of our sit reps and our episodes. You get an invite to our crazy busy Signal chat. The amount of intelligence that goes through there is unreal. Again, I'm under the weather. I'm sick. I cleared the messages last night. I woke up this morning. There was over 300. I cleared them because there's no way I could read through them, and checked just before I came in here, and there was another 287 or something like that. The amount of intelligence that's shared amongst our community members and as well as people who are part of Survival Dispatch is absolutely amazing. So you get an invite to our Signal chat. You get our entire library of Survival Dispatch Insider magazines, which are those guys that you can see on the wall over there. So obviously that's printed stuff, but you get our PDF version of all of them. We sell those for $9.99 a piece. So you're getting $370 in e-magazines for free. If you had nothing else, the shit hit the fan, and all you had were those 37 PDFs on a USB key, you would have all of the information that you would need as far as survival and prepping is concerned. And in addition to that, you also get enrolled in our SDN system, Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System, and you're automatically enrolled when you sign up. You don't have to do anything extra. We've only activated it once. We activated it when we hit Iran's nuclear facilities because there was a high probability of retaliatory action here. Now, with that being said, if nothing else, everybody has probably picked up on this over the course of these 2 series, 12 episode series that we're doing. The radical Islamic jihadis are insanely patient. I mean, they hold on to grudges for hundreds of years. So for Hamza bin Laden to be seeking retribution, for his father, I'm not surprised that it took this long, but that's their mentality, for lack of a better term. Alrighty, so moving on to segment number 4, so faith, communities, and leadership. I want to give a shameless plug to our good friend, Keith Graves. So Keith and I collaborate on a whole bunch of stuff. I met Keith, I want to say 3 years ago now. And we started collaborating right away. Y'all may remember he was on Survival Dispatch News fairly frequently. And that was because we were doing pre-records at the time. Unfortunately, we don't get to have him on as much now as we did then, just because he was a cop for 30 years. He missed dinner for 30 years. And he promised his wife he would always be there for dinner, and it conflicts with the time of Survival Dispatch News. But we still were fortunate to get him the odd time. And as I mentioned, Keith is also one of the people involved in dead drop intel. So on the front end there. So go to christianwarriortraining.com. And I just tried to go there right now, and for some reason it's giving me an error. So that's Substack. But for some reason, his website is not coming up for me. Do me a favor, somebody in the audience, try to go to christianwarriortraining.com and let me know if you're able to access it or not. I'm going to give it a quick try myself right now from just another way to see what happens. And boy, I don't know what's going on, but it's not coming up for me here. Can anybody else get christianwarriortraining.com to come up? Yeah, I want to come in a different way because we do recommendations back and forth and it won't come up. That's not good. Anyway, when christianwarriortraining.com comes back up again, do yourself a favor, check it out. Keith is like the #1 guy when it comes to church security now in the country. He consults for people. He gives away a ton of free training. He's just a super, super guy. I can't recommend him enough. But if your church doesn't have a security team, I highly recommend that you speak to the powers that be and get on that right away, because better late than never, but you really, really need to have a security team. A lot of churches as well are putting bollards in front so that people can't drive through the front end. I mean, it doesn't matter if somebody's mentally disturbed and they want to cause you harm, the mechanism isn't the problem behind it, right? So if they don't have guns, well, they'll use a car and run you over, just like New Orleans on January 1st. Or they'll set your building on fire, whatever the case may be. But I would highly suggest you look at bollards as well as the fact that for just your own personal use, plus church use, but your personal use, try to do a little bit of homework on secured comms, encrypted comms. So again, I come from high tech. So when I see people say, oh, Signal's not safe, that's just not true. It's an open source project. What that means is that people like myself can go to their GitHub and we can look at the source code and determine precisely what's in the software. It's the blueprints essentially. And I know for a fact, based on a couple people I know in the NSA who flat out said Signal is the only instant messenger that they've not been able to crack. So when you see people say, oh, well, there was a security vulnerability in Signal, no, what there was a phishing attempt. So that's somebody sending you an email pretending to be from Signal and saying, hey, you need to reset your password, click here. And the person clicks on it and it says, punch in your old password, punch in your new password. At that point in time, they now have your password, and that's the vulnerability. So in the tech industry, it's called a PEBCAC, PEBKAC. It stands for problem exists between keyboard and chair. So and that probably dates me because I think that one's 30 plus years old. But anyway, look, it would behoove you to use secure communications. Proton email, Signal for your chats are good choices. There's more choices, but those are good choices. I don't recommend Telegram ever since Pavel Durov was called in and arrested essentially by Macron in France and told either you give us a backdoor to your stuff or we're going to put you in jail. And part of their code base is open source. Part of their code base is not open source. So what's not open source, nobody can lay eyes on it, determine precisely what's in that source code. Physical security. So running drills, Keith does a bunch of this stuff with his security teams. He tells some interesting stories. The very first time that they ran security drills at his church, and he had come from California. When he retired, he likes to say he moved back to America after he retired. The very first time they ran a drill, let me see if I've got one handy here. So you can look this up. You can take a regular firearm and you can convert it to what's called a UTM. And what this is this has a tiny little paintball. This is a spent cartridge. It has this tiny little paintball traveling about 400 feet per second and has a regular primer on the back. And so you make a couple changes to the components in your pistol and you can let these off. There's no harm, no foul, like you're not hurting anybody. And typically you wouldn't shoot these at someone who didn't have some level of protection anyway, like eye protection, etc. But he ran a drill and he had been to the local PD and they said that the fastest they could get one officer to their church would be 8 minutes. So Keith's on a bullhorn and he's got a bunch of people that he brought in. to, basically be the active shooters, and they've all got UTM. So when you shoot a UTM, it sounds just like a regular gun. You get the same auditory report. And every minute, Keith would go 1 minute, and then another minute of the attack would go on 2 minutes. And when they got to 8 minutes, they stopped the drill. And that was one cop. They stopped the drill because everybody was dead. And that was the very first drill that they ran in his church. Now they're absolute ninjas when it comes to this stuff. And again, he gives this away for free. So highly recommend that when ChristianWarriorTraining.com comes back up, that if you're involved with your church, or if you could bend somebody's ear at your church to look at what Keith gives away for free, I highly, highly recommend it. The drill's second to none. There were people after that first drill that said to Keith, that was the longest 8 minutes of my life. And I'll just give you like a quick recollection. We were part of some flashlight training. If you don't know, I have this thing for flashlights, but tactical flashlight training at WAFT, where our families train. And these are essentially very high intensity stress simulations. Scenario training is what it's called. And I've been there a bunch of times. Philip is a friend of my wife's and mine. And the very first time we were there, we walked into they have an area where they've got this amazing food center, like Philip's Italian, Philip Tapino, likes to feed people well. So it's incredible food. So I'm walking through the dining area into where you get your food. And several people, as I walk by them, are looking at their watches going, holy crap, it's been 45 minutes since I did this drill, and my heart rate's still 130 beats per minute, 140 beats per minute. It's the best training you could possibly get. So I can't overstress how important that is. Mike Sterling likes to paraphrase Sun Tzu, who essentially said human beings never rise to the occasion, they fall to their level of training. If you've ever watched Keith, by the way, I just noticed a note on my screen here. He basically warns people that if you come to our church and you want to, commit a violent act, we're going to shoot you. And if the security team doesn't shoot you, then the pastor's going to shoot you. He carries 2 firearms. It's funny, not funny, right? It's not funny that this is what our world has come to. The other part that Keith covers that I've never heard anybody else cover on the topic of your churches is having alliances with other churches, so that if and when the shit hits the fan, you can put out a call for mutual aid. So mutual aid is a law enforcement term. So imagine you're in this small town, Andy Griffin, Barney Fife, that's all you've got. And shit goes down, and you put a call out to other municipalities, other counties, the state troopers. You're asking for mutual assistance, mutual aid to come in and help you with whatever this SHTF, attack is, active shooter terrorist attack. You can extend that logic to other churches as well, which I think is an absolutely fantastic idea on the part of Keith. And I mean, that's something he was intimately familiar with, being in law enforcement for 30 years. Segment number 5 is on personal and family preparedness tools. So emergency kits, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but this is all about reps. Hopefully the more times you hear us say these things, the more it'll strike a chord, and that you'll actually make the moves to do things, right? So clearly you have to have water, or the ability to purify water, food, first aid kits, and as I mentioned, communications. We're getting ready to do kind of like a roundup on communications. And there's no one size fits all. And we're back to 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So for example, when you see ham radios, GMRS radios, you see them on Amazon, Walmart, or whatever, and it says, range is 35 miles. No, like absolutely not, especially in a dense urban environment. If you're in the salt flats, or if you're in California, where they have the largest repeater network in the world, maybe, it's not uncommon in California. You're definitely not getting that here in Florida and in the Southeast. So those radios that say that they're good for 35 miles, when you have, heavy oak trees and a bunch of buildings, realistically, the cheapo ones from Walmart, the FRS radios, the family radios, you might get 3/4 of a mile to a mile in a dense urban center. And if you have a step up from there, like to a GMRS radio, which unfortunately is the same 22 channels. So think of shit going down. You're trying to communicate on a radio, even to somebody who lives just down the street. Everybody will be saturating those 22 channels. So it's not a bad option from an economical standpoint, but it's definitely not an optimum solution. So going to the next level above that, it really doesn't matter whether you're talking ham radios, GMRS, or FRS. And I'm sure some sad ham's going to disagree with me, but we have tested them all for every type of distance you can imagine. I have a 40-foot tower outside my window here. And essentially, if you're going mobile to mobile, so not handset, mobile that you would put in a truck, we get about 10 miles with the dense urban setting that we're in. Again, handset to handset, a mile, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles max if you have some element of line of sight. So you're not going to connect with people who live out of the city or across the city with those types of radios. If you want to stick with radios, you really have to go all the way up and get into shortwave high frequency, which I won't geek out on and get too deep into that. But there's some other really interesting options for you out there, and then I'll move on to the next segment. And we've mentioned these before. So the Garmin InReach Mini 2, not the Mini, the Mini's discontinued, the Mini 2, it's $350. We pay $12 a month, but you can pause it and restart it whenever you want. You connect your phone to it. It tethers to your phone and becomes your modem, essentially. So your phone is connecting to the Garmin InReach Mini 2, which is connecting to the Iridium satellites, and then it brings it back down. So if somebody else has a Garmin InReach Mini 2 and they've tethered it to their phone, the comm goes from you up to the satellite down to that individual. If the other individual doesn't have a Garmin InReach Mini, it goes from you up to the Iridium satellite down to the Garmin communications center and then goes out over regular networks. So you can see how that could fail in an SHTF situation. But if both parties in your family or your group have the Garmin InReach Mini 2s, that's a pretty decent solution. Everybody's familiar with LTE, long-term evolution. That was the data network prior to 5G being rolled out. We have a gazillion LTE towers in the country. They're not a high-value target because most phones don't use that anymore, especially with the constricted amount of bandwidth. But there are mobile radios now that you pay $25 a year, and you configure them to all be part of the same group, and you can communicate over the LTE network around the world for 20 some odd dollars a month or year, pardon me, not per month. We're going to be looking at those here shortly. And if you want communications as a private citizen or encrypted communications as a private citizen, you're looking at business class licensing. I won't get deep into that either. So suffice it to say, comms really high on the list for, your preparedness. Skills, if you can get out there, take a Stop the Bleed course. It's, as we've seen recently, there was no saving Charlie Kirk. I mean, the blood loss was too crazy, too fast. But that young girl who was stabbed in Charlotte possibly could have been saved. And the reason I say that is Scott from Kentucky Ballistics was shooting a breech-loaded 50 cal, 50 BMG made by some guys over here in Tampa. What a breech loader is basically there's a cap on the back of the barrel that unscrews, and you put the round in, and then you screw it back on again. And then you fold the stock back up and away you go. It blew the threads off of that cap and went straight into his carotid artery. And he was a cop at the time, and he had training, and he stuck his fingers in there while his dad rushed him to the hospital. His dad does all of his filming. The only reason he survived is because he knew enough to plug that with his fingers. Otherwise he would have bled out in the blink of an eye. So Stop the Bleed course is super important. Improving your situational awareness. For example, when we go to restaurants, I always sit with my back against the wall where I have a purview of everybody who's coming in and out. It's not paranoia. I just like to see who's coming in and out. And having that level of situational awareness could be the difference between life and death. I mean, the bad guys love to have the element of surprise. It's the most powerful thing that they have, which is that flashlight training that Philip does is actually all about interrupting their OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, and them all of a sudden realizing, oh shit, this person's actually paying attention. I probably, shouldn't attack them. I'll go after somebody who's an easier target, sort of thing. And the last one, and we've discussed this quite a bit lately, but again, it's all about reps. We're just trying to make sure that everybody's fully aware. Having, some community lifelines. So that would mean some sort of neighborhood, alliance, whatever you want to call it, neighborhood watch program, neighborhood assistance program, as well as your church, as well as your business networks. I'm not a huge fan of Chamber of Commerce. That's another story, but it is a not too bad of a way to network locally. There's other business groups that you can network with as well. All right, segment 6 was the last one. Moving forward. So this is, hope, faith, long-term strategies. And, what's the vision for America enduring through all this stuff and preserving core values, even though there's going to be this constant threat of these, call it skirmish terrorist attacks on a regular basis. And, I think it comes down to encouraging civic action, essentially. You're going to have to make sure that you vet the people that you vote for in your county. The most important vote that you've got is your sheriff. He has more power than anybody else that you can actually have an impact on your day-to-day life with as far as voting. But you're going to want to prioritize and support leaders who are focused on security, but focused on security without taking away your civil liberties, because that's the typical MO of, the control freaks, right? Well, listen, we hate to do it, but we got to take away this civil liberty that you have, because if it saves just one person's life, it's worth it. And that's just BS, to be quite frank. And other than that, I had a really interesting comment from a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and I think I may have briefly touched on this before, but he basically said there was a point in his life where when somebody did him wrong, he would do a list of, how he was going to pay them back and how he was going to get them for it. And one of his friends said to him, "What are you wasting your time with that for? Let God look after that. You just carry on and do your thing, and it'll all work out." And somebody had embezzled a couple $100,000 from him, and normally he would have gone after this particular person, and he didn't. And 6 months later, the guy declared bankruptcy. He lost everything. I mean, he was completely toast. And so that person said to me, he said, learning to let God fight those fights while you keep your eye on the ball moving forward is pretty important. So I think that's a really interesting perspective, and I appreciate the friend who told me that just recently, by the way. So other than that, I mean, those are the high level points. If you go to survivaldispatch.news, there's more in the SITREP. If you go to deaddropintel.org, the SITREP is on there as well. But the broadcasts that are going out to Dead Drop are going to be more focused on security experts. So all the people that I've mentioned to you who are part of Dead Drop. So Mike Glover, it's called Dead Drop Intel with Mike Glover, Khalid Muhammad, Sarah Adams, Jane Doe, Matt Butler, Ryan Guillot, Keith Graves, and several other individuals that are on Khalid's team. So keep an eye out for that as well. You're going to see some really interesting roundtable discussions happening over there. And, that's it as far as tonight's main topic is concerned. I just trying to drive the point home that the environment that we've been discussing, it's not going to go away. The intelligence is very clear. He who forgets history is doomed to repeat its mistakes. So we've seen what's happened in the Middle East and even in Europe to some extent already. And it's just everybody's got to step up from living in comfort in the most permissive environment where 99% of people have outsourced their security to law enforcement. You're just going to have to take on some of that burden yourself with a higher level of situational awareness and the ability to actually act when confronted by sudden violence, as Tony Blair likes to call it. All right, so let's go to the hero of the day here. And you have to bear with me here for a second. It appears I got something out of order here, so apologies. Here we go. All right. So today's hero of the day is Marine Corps Corporal Roy James Jewers. He was KIA on September 12, 1967 in Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. Roy was 22 years old and from East Norwich, New York. G Company, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines. Remember Roy today. He is an American hero. I mean, there's no shortage of American heroes. There's definitely no shortage of American heroes that came out of Vietnam that lost their life, and it didn't need to be that way. But anyway, I really enjoy doing the Hero of the Day stuff because I've come across some people that I didn't know about, and it's really cool to be able to bring them back up again all these years later and say, hey, here's an example of a great American hero. So moving on from there, shout out to John Wheaton, who was supposed to be with us, but I'm guessing he got held up with the event that he was attending. He submitted a couple news stories on Charlie Kirk's assassin, Tyler Robinson, living with a transgender partner, this male transitioned to female, of course, shock. And just before Charlie, was shot, he said there was too many, not that day, but just prior to that there were too many trans shooters, which of course we have seen. So here's the article when it first came out, or the post, I should say, from Nick Sordor. And it's just, I don't know what to say about the situation. I hope to God that something good comes out of this, because it's just been, it's heartbreaking to think of his little daughter running towards him, trying to help him after he was shot. I mean, it's just mind-numbing. There's a second post that John sent that goes with the first one. Roommate identified. Breaking. Roommate of Charlie Kirk assassin identified as Lance Twiggs, 22. This comes as reports say the shooter had a transgender partner who was transitioning from male to a woman. Yeah. Okay. All right. So only thing left is the conflicted question of the night. Put the following resources in order of importance to you: food, water, shelter, weapons. If you don't mind, those of you who are still hanging with me here, I'd love to see, take 3. You're allowed to have 3 out of the 4. What 3 would you have? Put it in the live chat, because I'm about to tell you what 3 I would have. I would take the water, shelter, and weapons. If I have a weapon, I can get food. So, and if I've got water, I can go with a little bit of hunger. But if I don't have a gun, I can't defend myself. If I don't have shelter, then potentially fall to, the elements. So some answers coming in already. We're broadcasting on 9 different platforms. I try to do my best to keep my eye on the live chat, but it's tough when it's just me flying solo. But those are your choices: food, water, shelter, weapons. You get 3 out of the 4. Right on. Sorry, I was just checking to see what somebody else had put up there. So that's it for tonight. We will be back tomorrow night to kick off a brand new 12 episode series in our long war. I don't know what you would call it. Marathon kind of works. And it'll be, the next series is titled Living in the Aftermath, America Under Siege, Day 2, the follow-on strikes. So that's basically the environment that we'll be in. 9/11 2.0 will be big, and then after that, smaller attacks will be happening on some sort of regular basis. Want to mention our main sponsor tonight, Carnivalt. So this is a freeze-dried American meat. So beef, chicken, pork, no mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines. The bags are even made in America. The O2 absorbers are made in America. And so a bag of steak like this is 6 ounces. It makes 6 servings. It makes 1.5 pounds once you reconstitute it. And because there's the moisture content so low, when you marinate it, it pulls all the flavor into it. It's an absolutely phenomenal product. So you don't need to have it refrigerated, obviously, or in a freezer. So it's great from a prepping perspective, but they've just released single pack servings, which is pretty cool. So if you're on the trail, you're hiking, hunting, camping, whatever, fishing, you name it, you can take the single serves with you and reconstitute them in less than 10 minutes. It comes unflavored. You flavor it the way that you want. and bam, you've got super high quality protein. There's 150 grams of protein in here, 6 servings, 25 grams a piece. If you go to carnivalt.com, use code EATMEAT, all one word, and that will get you 10% off. If you order over $99, you'll have free shipping in addition to that. And no promises, but these are pretty cool, guys. Don't be surprised if you get something extra, kind of like Summit Racing does with a lot of their stuff. But that's basically it. So we'll be back tomorrow night. Between now and then, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America, and enjoy the closing video.
You can't go out there. You know how dangerous it is.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the purge sanctioned by the U.S. government.
Every night they come for us, not by chance, by design.
Law enforcement isn't to prevent crime. Law enforcement solves crime.
The crime is down. Leftist policies, opening the gates, releasing the monsters back into our streets to target the innocent, to purge America from within.
It's after police found the body of Dr. Julie Gard-Chanelli in the woods near a dog park in Auburn.
Tonight we're following a developing story where a woman was shot and killed. It all happened in the middle of the afternoon, right along a busy street.
These criminals roam free in our country to offend again and again.
No one is safe. Not in our homes. Not in our parks. Not on our trains.
His name's DeCarlos Brown, 35 years old, he's homeless, and he's been arrested 14 other times.
They call it reform. We call it the early release.
If you release a monster will kill.
Radicalized judges turning the judicial system into the purge. But one man is taking a stand. One man is fearless in the presence of evil. These godless policies end now. We're purging the purge.
We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand.